Welcome back. You've come a long way already. You've explored what lights you up, what you're good at, what the world needs, and you've even started listening to real people and testing tiny offers. You're no longer just thinking about Ikigai. You're actually putting pieces of it into motion. In Lesson 13 of our Ikigai course, we'll discuss an uncomfortable but crucial topic, money, which is essential for sustaining your Ikigai. More specifically, we'll look at sustainable money, how to think about business models, risk, and something called Runway, so that the life you're building is one you can actually keep living. Money can trigger a lot of emotions: fear, shame, scarcity, pride, confusion. Some people try to ignore it and hope it will work itself out. Others focus on it so intensely that they sacrifice their health, values, and relationships in the process. Ikigai asks you to take a different path, to bring money into the conversation honestly, without letting it dominate or disappear. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a clearer sense of why money has to be part of a purpose conversation, not an enemy of it. The main models people use to earn a living from meaningful work. What Runway is and how to calculate your own. How to think about risk and exit criteria in a calm, grounded way. Let's start by stating something very simple. Money is not the villain here. Money is a tool. It's one of the ways the world exchanges value. It pays for your housing, your food, your healthcare, your family's needs, your future safety. If you want to sustain meaningful work over years or decades, you can't afford to pretend money doesn't matter. At the same time, chasing money without meaning leads straight back into the golden handcuffs trap. Lots of reward, very little fulfillment. So the goal isn't more money at any cost. The goal is enough in a way that supports a life you want to keep living. That enough is different for everyone. For some, it might mean a simpler life with plenty of time and moderate income. For others, it might mean a higher level of financial responsibility and therefore higher earnings. The important thing is that you're conscious about it. Before we talk about models, I'd like you to imagine a simple scale with two ends. On one end is work that feels deeply meaningful but is chronically underpaid or unstable. On the other end is work that's well paid but hollow and draining. You've probably been closer to one end or the other at different times in your life. Ikigai doesn't live at either extreme. It lives somewhere in the middle, where your work is meaningful enough to feel worthwhile and stable enough to be sustainable. Getting there requires both inner and outer work. Clarity about your values and clarity about your economics. So let's talk about the outer side for a moment. The different ways people make money from their work. These are your basic economic models. The first model is employment. This is where most people start and often where they stay. You work for an organization. You receive a salary or hourly wage. There's some level of predictability in your income, and you may get benefits like pensions, health coverage, or paid leave. The upside of employment is stability and structure. You don't have to find your own clients. You don't have to design everything from scratch. You're part of a system. The downside, as you already know, is that you have limited control over the direction of the work, the culture, and sometimes the alignment with your Ikigai. Your purpose can absolutely be expressed inside employment, but it takes intention and sometimes negotiation. The second model is freelance or self-employment as a service provider. Here, you're still largely trading your time and skills for money, but you're the one finding and managing clients. You might be consulting, coaching, designing, writing, training, or offering some other service. The upside is autonomy. You can choose who you work with, what you offer, and how you structure your time. You can gradually shape your client base and your projects around your Ikigai. The downside is variability. Income can fluctuate, you carry more risk, and you have to handle sales, marketing, and administration. The third model is product-based. Instead of selling your time directly, you create something that can be sold multiple times: courses, books, software, memberships, digital tools, physical products, and so on. This is often romanticized as passive income, but in reality it requires a lot of upfront work and ongoing maintenance. The upside is scalability. If you get it right, you can serve more people without working one-on-one with each of them. The downside is that it's harder to validate and build from scratch. It needs a larger audience or distribution channel, and you still need to support and update what you create. There are also hybrid models that combine these in different ways. For example, you might keep a part-time job for stability while freelancing on the side. Or you might offer high-touch services to a few clients and gradually add products that serve more people. Many realistic Ikigai paths are hybrid, especially during transitions. The point here isn't to pick the best model, but to understand the trade-offs. Each model has its own balance of stability, autonomy, scalability, and risk. Your Ikigai will likely guide you toward one combination more than others, depending on your temperament, responsibilities, and goals. Now let's introduce a key concept from your manuscript, Runway. Runway is a simple but powerful idea. It answers the question, if I made a change, how long could I realistically sustain myself before I'd be in trouble financially? To calculate Runway, you look at two numbers: how much you have in savings that you're willing to use to support a transition, and how much your life actually costs each month. For example, if you have $18,000 in accessible savings you're willing to use for a transition, and your monthly expenses are $3,000, then your runway is 6 months. That means you could, in theory, support yourself for 6 months without additional income. That's a straightforward calculation, but it becomes more nuanced when you factor in partial income, like keeping your current job part-time while starting something new, or reducing your expenses temporarily to stretch your runway. Why does runway matter for Ikigai? Because it turns vague financial fear into concrete parameters. Instead of feeling a general, paralyzing sense of, I can't afford to change anything, you can say, if I make this particular adjustment and accept this level of risk, I have X months of runway. What could I realistically test or build in that time? Some people discover that their runway is shorter than they'd like, which might mean they need to save more or reduce expenses before making a big move. Others are surprised to find they have more runway than they thought, which can open up possibilities they had mentally closed off. Either way, you're dealing with reality instead of imagination. Alongside runway, your manuscript introduces another crucial idea: exit criteria. Exit criteria are pre-decided conditions that tell you when to exit or change an experiment. They're like guardrails. For example, you might say, if after 6 months of running this side project in my spare time, I see no sign of genuine interest, no clients, no strong feedback, then I will either radically adjust the idea or let it go, and I won't keep pouring time into it out of sheer stubbornness. Or you might say, I will not leave my current job until I've lined up at least 3 paying clients for my new service and proven that I can earn a minimum of X per month consistently for 3 months. Why is this important? Because when we're emotionally invested in an idea, we tend to either quit too early because of fear or hang on too long because of ego, even when the evidence is poor. Exit criteria help you make decisions based on plans you made in a calmer state, not in the heat of anxiety. Now let's bring all of this together into a way of thinking about risk. Risk is not something to avoid entirely. In fact, some level of risk is built into anything meaningful you'll ever do. The key is to move from blind risk, jumping without a plan, to calculated risk, taking steps that are bold but measured. A few questions can help you calibrate this. What is the worst realistic outcome of this experiment? What can I do to reduce the downside if things don't go as hoped? What is the cost of doing nothing for another year? That last question is often overlooked. We tend to focus on the risk of change and forget the risk of staying exactly where we are. If you're in a deeply misaligned situation, another year of numbness, burnout, or quiet despair has its own cost on your health, relationships, and sense of self. So how do you apply all this to your own Ikigai path in a practical way? First, get honest about your numbers. Take a clear look at your monthly expenses. Include everything: housing, food, debt payments, insurance, the things you actually spend money on. Then look at your savings and any other resources you could draw on temporarily if you needed to. Calculate a simple version of your runway. You can refine it later, but even a rough sense is better than none. Second, Think about your current work model and potential future models. Are you employed, self-employed, building products, or some mix? What are the pros and cons of each for you personally? Where do you see room for small shifts now, and where might you want to head over the next few years? Third, identify 1 or 2 modest experiments you could run in the next 3 to 6 months that move you a step closer to your Ikigai, and ask, what level of risk does this really involve? How can I design it so that if it doesn't work, I still learn a lot and stay financially okay? Maybe that experiment is increasing your hours on a side project. Maybe it's reducing your current work hours slightly to create space if that's feasible. Maybe it's charging for a prototype offer you've tested for free to see if people will pay. Fourth, set simple exit criteria for those experiments. Decide in advance what you'll consider success, what you'll consider a sign to pivot, and what time frame you'll use. For example, if I can get 5 paying clients at X rate in the next 3 months, I'll consider moving to 4 days a week at my current job. If I get only 1 or 2 and it feels like a grind, I'll reevaluate the offer and possibly try a different angle. This approach keeps you moving without gambling everything. Underneath all of this is a very compassionate principle. Your Ikigai isn't meant to destroy you financially. It's meant to support a flourishing life. You don't prove your commitment to purpose by putting yourself in constant panic about money. You prove it by steadily building structures, income streams, savings, systems that allow you to keep doing meaningful work year after year. In the next video, we're going to look at another kind of economics, energy economics, because money isn't the only resource that matters. Your time, your attention, your physical and emotional energy are just as critical and just as limited. We'll talk about boundaries, capacity, and burnout prevention so that you don't build a beautiful, meaningful life on paper and then find that you're too exhausted to live it. For now, take a gentle, honest look at your numbers, your models, and your risk tolerance. No shame, no judgment, just clarity. You're not trying to impress anyone with how brave you are or how little you need. You're designing a life you can actually continue to live. You deserve purpose and stability. Those two are allowed to exist together. I'll see you in the next lesson.